Hey guys, Ben here with Oddly Armed, and today we have another gun review taking a look at a Heckler Koch MR556A1, which is essentially the US-made civilian version of the famous HK416. So let's go ahead, talk about the history of the HK416, and take a look at how I have mine set up. And real quick, I want to thank the Echo Valley Training Center in Cape on Hill, West Virginia. I've been shooting out there for years, did the accuracy testing for this guy out there, so if you're in the DC metro area, please check them out. So getting into the history of the 416 really goes back to the early 2000s when U.S. Army's Delta Force was looking for a rifle that would replace the MP5 in their inventory. So basically something that was very compact and was chambered in 5.56 and could replace their 9mm MP5s. The issue with the M4 at the time was it was a little bit too big for what they were looking for, and shorter barrel AR-15s did exist. However, you do run into reliability issues with the kind of internal piston system that the AR-15 uses when you get into very short barrel lengths like 10 inches or below. So they were looking for something that utilized a short stroke gas piston system, which tends to do a little bit better when you have a barrel as short as 10 inches. One person we absolutely have to talk about when we're talking about the history of the 416 is Larry Vickers. And Larry Vickers was the research and development NCO for Delta Force at the time, so he was deeply in bed with Heckler & Koch, coming up with the design for the 416 and getting across what requirements that they had for them to build against. And during its development cycle, it was actually known as the HK M4. Now, Colt, of course, at the time took offense to that. Of course, they held the notional trademark for M4, and after some litigation in court, it was actually decided that the term M4 being a U.S. military designation couldn't be trademarked, so Colt couldn't own it. However, HK went ahead and just called it the HK416 instead. Now, development was finished in 2005, at which point Delta Force adopted the HK416 and started delivering it to their forces. And some of the really nice advantages for the HK416 is reliability with shorter barrel lengths over an M4 style rifle, and then also for an over the beach or basically for maritime troops coming from the ocean onto land. It's more reliable having the 416 because it can eject water out of the gas system versus an M4 where if that your gas tube gets a ton of water in it, it will actually explode. And there's a famous HK video from the 2000s actually demonstrating that with a dude in scuba gear just chilling in a mud hole shooting rifles. Now, the next major adopter of the HK416 platform was the Norwegian Armed Forces in 2008. So they picked this up, replaced all their rifles with it. And then in 2017, the HK416 won the trials for the French Armed Forces to replace the FAMAS. The most recent major military to adopt the HK416 was the German military, and they're going to be adopting the 416 as the G95A1 to replace the G36. So please check out my Tommy Built T36 video where I go into the history on the G36. But essentially, after some reported issues with the G36, the German military was looking for a replacement. The main trial was between a variant of the HK416 and another German company, Hänel, and their MK556. Now, this gets a little contentious because MK556 originally won that contract. However, in German court, after Heckler & Koch basically threw a fit, it was determined that the MK556 was actually kind of a copy of the 416. So they ended up throwing that out and adopting the HK416 instead as the G95A1. And of course, I saved the best for last, and we're going to be talking about the United States Marine Corps adopting the HK416 as the M27 infantry automatic rifle. In the late 2000s, the U.S. Marine Corps was looking to replace the M249 squad automatic weapon, which has been in inventory for decades, due to some of the issues that they were facing in the global war on terror. So there were some reliability issues with the M249, as well as it was just very heavy, difficult to maneuver with. So they were looking for a replacement which was a lot lighter and also utilized standard magazines. So they wanted to go from the belt feed with the 200 round belt to something that utilized a standard Stanag magazine. Now, the concept behind replacing the belt-fed saw with a magazine-fed rifle was really more about changing from suppression by volume of fire to the idea of suppression by accuracy. So essentially, with volume of fire, you're getting a ton of rounds downrange, which are flying all around your adversary. However, they're not really going to be that accurate, and they're more to keep their head down while a maneuver element flanks around them. Versus suppression by precision fire, essentially. So having a more accurate rifle than the original SAW, you could get those rounds a lot closer to where that adversary is laying down. So you would keep their heads down easier with less rounds potentially doing that. So the idea is essentially the same. You're still trying to keep that enemy locked down in that single position, so a maneuver element can get around them, do our whole maneuver warfare thing to overcome the enemy. And eventually the HK416 won the IAR trials and was adopted as the M27 IAR. Now, a couple of years after that, it was again modified a little bit and given a new optic essentially, and adopted again as the M38 squad designated marksman rifle. So that was essentially our DMR rifle in the United States Marine Corps. And finally, in 2017, the Marine Corps announced that every member of a squad would be equipped with the M27. So it basically took over for the SAW, took over for the M4, for the M16. This was the new standard rifle across platforms for the United States Marine Corps. So now let's get a little bit into the civilian history of the 416. So this, of course, is an MR556. This is made in the United States, not an imported rifle. And it does have some differences from the military 416s. Now, the way it operates is essentially all the same. So it has the same short stroke gas piston system, same bolt carrier group, same stock, same everything else. The biggest difference is going to be with the barrel. So this has a heavy profile barrel in it, and it's also not chrome lined like the US military or the European military barrels, which is very unfortunate. That is one of the favorite parts of the 416 because they have legendary barrels when they're their H&K chrome lined ones. Whatever their juju is with making those things, they last for 20,000 plus rounds, which is pretty insane. Now, H&K says that they didn't go with the chrome line barrel for the MR556 because this rifle was made particularly for accuracy. And the chrome lining of a barrel can actually degrade the accuracy slightly depending on who does it. So they were really going for the maximum accuracy potential out of this rifle that they could. They also swapped out the pivot pins for ones that actually lock in place, which are supposed to reduce the play between the lower and upper receiver, which potentially can also improve accuracy, although that one's a little bit suspect to me. Now, as of 2025, Heckler Koch in the US have released pretty much a replacement for the MR556A1, which is the new A4 model. Some of the biggest difference between the A1 and the A4 are going to be the control. So the A4 adds a right side bolt hold open and bolt release, which is a very, very nice feature, and I wish I had that on this one. Essentially, it's bringing it up to an HK416 A5 spec, so adding those ambidextrous controls. They also redid the profile of the lower receiver, which allows for more magazine types due to the profile of the receiver on this. Gen 2 mag pulls will not work in it. But the one thing that people are really disappointed in is the barrel is that same non-chrome line barrel. So didn't update that, but otherwise there are some good updates. All right, and that brings us up to current on the history of the 416 and the MR556. So let's go ahead, get in a close look at mine and see how I have it set up. All right, so starting at the front, I do have a Chemo muzzle device on here. This is one of my best suppressor hosts. I absolutely love this thing with a can on it. And that's specifically because of the gas block. You can see I have an adjustable Waffenberg gas block on there, which makes this a joy to shoot with a can on it. As far as the light, that is a SOTAC gear, basically a clone of a Surefire Scout light, which I'm really just testing out, see how well it holds up over time. And doing the same thing here with this Somo Gear PEC 15, so just testing it out, seeing how well it holds up and how well it does, as well as a Leaf PEC sight there on the front. To control both of those, I have a Unity tap sync switch, and that controls the light and the laser. And all of that is on a Geisley handguard with a B5 grip on there. As far as the optics go, I am running an EOTech EXPS3 Tech 0, and that's because this is essentially the best red dot sight or holographic sight for night vision. And also run a 3-power magnifier, a Troy backup sight, and a Geisley airborne charging handle on there. Now, as far as the grip, the selector, the ejection port cover, and the trigger guard, that's basically all HK, and those are all parts meant for the HK416. And then moving back to the stock, or actually the castle nut here is something I did swap out and upgraded. The 416A5 and newer have a larger castle nut, which is supposed to help with durability if you're going to be mortaring the rifle so you don't break your buffer tube. Then moving back, I have a slimline stock on here, as well as a QD sling swivel, which hooks in at the back. All right, and there's really not going to be anything new to see here on the left side of the rifle. We'll just give you a look at the Somo gear again. The handguard, you can see that thick profile barrel in there. Then moving back, we have our receiver, and as well as my optics on here, and our controls and the grip. And then moving back, we also have the stock and a QD sling swivel on the left side there too. Let's go ahead and kick off the ratings with accuracy, and the MR556A1 is going to get a 4. At 100 yards with 55 grain M193 ammunition, I was able to get a 2-inch group, which is really not bad at all considering that is just standard ball ammunition. Next up, we have Aftermarket, where I'm going to give the MR556A1 a 4. There's actually a lot of interchangeability between this and an AR-15. So you have the mil-spec buffer tube on here, so you can put any AR-15 style stock you want on there. It's an AR-15 style grip, so you can swap that out for whatever AR grip you want. It's an AR-15 style charging handle, so charging handles for an AR will work in here. So it's stuff like that. Some AR-15 style triggers will also work in here. However, there is a firing pin safety on the bolt carrier group, so if it is a shorter hammer, it likely won't defeat that and therefore won't work in this rifle. Now, the biggest thing, which is going to be proprietary to this rifle, is going to be the handguards, because this actually disconnects with a single bolt because you have to access your gas system. So as far as different companies making handguards for this, you have, of course, H&K makes quite a few different types of handguards for the 416. B&T makes a handguard. Geisley makes several handguards to include this one. Remington Defense, they used to make handguards for this when they were a thing, and now those are very, very hard to find and expensive. You also have Midwest Industries make handguards for it, and then there's a couple of different other companies that are making them, as well as Brownells makes their own in-house handguards for these as well. You do also have a couple of different options for gas blocks for this, and that's something that I would actually change out for the A1 version of the MR556 to get a suppressor setting. HK does make a adjustable gas block, however those are incredibly expensive and hard to find. Mine is a Waffenberg gas block, which is also expensive, but it's very adjustable and makes this an incredible suppressed platform. Brownells also makes vented gas blocks for these because they make the BRN4, which is essentially a 416 clone. So you do have options there, and then Nefarious Arms also, I believe, makes one, or it might just be Black Ops Defense, but there are other options out there for an adjustable gas block. And same with barrel. Nefarious Arms makes barrels for these, and I know they're working on a 300 Blackout barrel for these as well, but that's another part that's not interchangeable with standard AR-15s. Next up, we have durability, and I'm going to give this guy a 5. It's absolutely fantastic with the 416. The build quality is all on point. All the materials are fantastic. Great aluminum, great polymer. The steel is very well made. So I've had several thousand rounds through this rifle, and I haven't seen any abnormal wear. I haven't had anything break on it. Everything has been fantastic, so I have no reason to not trust this rifle. Next up is going to be Ergonomics, where the HK416 or MR556 is going to get a 4. So let's go ahead and start looking at the controls, and there's not going to be a whole lot of surprises here. It's going to be mostly AR-15 style. However, at the gas block, again, this is a Waffenberg gas block, so this is very easy to swap. It is a little bit stiff when it's carboned up, but you just turn it, and it goes from suppressed, unsuppressed, and then you also have like suppressed plus. There's like 5 or 6 different settings on this gas block, but basically just turn that. Now moving back to the receiver, everything back here is AR-15 style. So you have your AR-15 style magazine release. It's just on the right side here on the A1. The A4 adds ambi. You have your trigger. You have our standard ejection port cover here. And then you can see the nice HK and MR on the bolt carrier group. Your safety here is going to be 90 degrees. The biggest feature for the safety on this is if you go ahead and fire it, you can flip it to safe. So everyone loves that about the 416. To me, it's not a huge deal, but that is something that's often touted as a feature. Now, taking a look at the left side, you can see our bolt catch, bolt release there. Everything is AR-15 style. This rifle is really just a piston-driven AR-15 in most ways. Charging handle is again AR-15 style, and this is a Geisley airborne charging handle in there. Then there you can see it locked open, and then coming back. Standard AR-15, nothing crazy. And then this slimline HK416 stock, it just adjusts there with the button at the bottom, and you can pull it out. Now, the one thing on this buffer tube is there are two detents in there, which basically put pressure on the inside of the stock and helps it so it doesn't wobble a lot. But that's really all we have to talk about as far as the controls on the 416. And next up, we have maintenance, where I'm going to give the MR556A4. Now, as far as disassembly goes, it comes apart almost exactly like an AR-15. The biggest differences are going to be with the pins on the receiver, so our takedown pins. They're going to be locking, so you actually have to have a bullet tip to push those across, or some other small tool or something. So it can be a little bit annoying, but generally it's not an issue at all. And then, of course, for the handguard, you have to take that off to get to the gas system. That's easy enough to do. You can actually use the bolt as a tool, depending on your handguard, to take it off. Some people say that's not advisable because you have the potential of cracking bolt lugs. I'll do it from time to time, but I generally avoid trying to do that. Now, as far as taking apart your gas system, it's incredibly easy on this, and cleaning it is very easy as well. The rifle stays pretty clean as well due to that short stroke gas piston system, unless you're running it suppressed, but any gun you put a can on is going to get incredibly dirty no matter what you do. As far as the availability of parts for these, they are pretty available. So you can get OEM HK parts. However, they're going to be incredibly expensive because it's HK and you suck and we hate you. So the parts are going to be spendy. However, there are some aftermarket replacement parts for the 416. So the biggest producer of parts is going to be Brownells because, of course, they're building a clone of the HK416. Their bolt carrier group is slightly different since it doesn't have a firing pin safety on it, but it will work in this rifle. Same with the bolt. So if you're looking for cheaper replacement parts, that's somewhere you can go, as well as for gas system parts, which are actually quite a bit cheaper than if you need to get a bolt or a bolt carrier group. And next up, we have modularity, where the 416 is going to get a 4. And that's because it's essentially going to be the same as an AR-15. So you can swap the stocks, the grips, charging handles, all that fun stuff. The only stuff that is going to be really different is the handguard, which is going to be easier to swap out than it is on an AR-15 because it's just held on with a single pin there. So you have to be able to remove it to clean the gas system and take that apart. So it's very easy to swap out the handguard. You can pull the barrel and replace it. It's pretty much the same process as it is on an AR-15. So if you get a new barrel, you can do that, but it is more of an armorer's level task than something you're going to be doing on the fly, like with the MCX. Now, one thing we need to talk about for the A1 version of the MR556 is the magwell. So you can see there, it's actually a little bit longer than it is on a standard AR-15 in the front. So this is my T91, and it has a standard AR-15 style magwell. And you can see if we line it up, the MR556 actually drops down a little bit more at the front of the trigger of the magwell, and that actually blocks it from being able to use certain types of magazines. So if I set that aside, we'll come back over here. This is a Gen 2 Magpul magazine. So this has an overstop or an overinsertion stop at the front of the magazine here, and this actually precludes it from fitting in the MR556A1. So you can see right there, it won't lock into place. And that's because that overstop insertion tab is hitting that longer front of the mag well. However, it does work with most other AR-15 style magazines. So here I have a SCAR magazine, and this is basically just standard SANAG, and that locks in just fine. So it's basically anything that has an over insertion tab in the front is not going to work in the MR556. The US Marine Corps, when they did adopt this, they actually had to go to Magpul Gen 3 magazines since the Gen 2s didn't work. Magpul developed this magazine specifically for the M27 IAR due to this issue. And next up we have price, where the MR556 is going to get a 1 because this is an expensive beast. Comes in at over $3,000 because it's an H&K and you suck and we hate you. So you're going to be paying a pretty significant chunk of money to get one of these rifles. Next up we have shooting characteristics, where I'm going to give the MR556 a 5. So starting out with the trigger, it is a very nice mil-spec style AR trigger. So it comes in about 5 pounds 6 ounces. It has a very nice smooth pull. Doesn't have any creep to it. Nice wall. It is a 2-stage trigger, so you can get very good accuracy with this trigger, and personally I would not feel like I need to change this out. Now, as far as the recoil impulse goes, it is going to be slightly stiffer than an AR-15 on most of the gas settings, just because short-stroke gas piston systems tend to have just a little bit more oomph to them than the internal piston system, because of the way the essentially the piston system hits the top of the bolt carrier group and knocks it back. You're going to be getting a little bit more felt recoil out of it. Now, as far as a suppressor hose goes, with the stock vented gas block on one of these guys, it is not a great suppressor hose, and that's because it doesn't have an adjustable gas system from the factory, at least in the A1 form. But if you swap out that gas block to an adjustable gas block, so like the Waffenberg I have on here or the new MR556A4 gas block, it becomes an absolutely fantastic suppressor hose. So this is actually my best suppressor hose in my entire armory. On the suppress setting with my full back pressure Saker 762 can on there, this thing, no gas to the face whatsoever, and the recoil literally disappears on it because, for one, it's a heavy rifle, and then it just soaks up all the recoil on it. Now, I also run this with my B&T SRBS 762 low back pressure can, and it runs very well on this rifle. Again, I do have to run it on the normal setting on this, not on the suppressed setting, but it is still a very, very nice suppressor hose. I'm not getting any gas to the face, and the recoil on it is very subdued. Next up, we have reliability, where it's going to get a full 5. I've never had any issue on this rifle. That hasn't been because I had the gas system in the wrong setting. So it's absolutely fantastic in terms of reliability. And next up we have weight, where the MR556 is going to get a 2. And that's because this rifle comes in over 8 pounds. So it is a very heavy rifle. And that was actually some of the complaints about the earlier MR556 models, to include this one, is the profile of the barrel is extremely heavy. It's a heavy profile barrel built for accuracy, so you're adding a ton of weight there. So some of the newer variants like the A4 are going to have a lighter profile barrel, which is going to save a little bit of weight, but it's still a heavy rifle due to the gas system. So just be ready for a chalker. And when we go ahead and add up all 10 categories for the MR556, we get a 38, which is going to put it pretty solidly in the A tier. So this is a very, very good rifle. In terms of durability, this thing is absolutely fantastic. This is one of the best shooting rifles I have in my entire armory as well. So I love this rifle in that term. Where it really gets let down is price. It is very expensive, and there's really no way around that. It's going to be a very expensive rifle to own. But pretty much everything else is going to be AR-15 style. A lot of people just consider this an AR-15 variant. I tend to think it's a little bit different, but yeah, it's going to be pretty much the same characteristics. And the final thing is where I think the 416 ranks in terms of coolness. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put it up in the A tier, and it actually does see a lot of use in movies. So pop culture-wise, there's a ton of stuff out there. So it's in some of the Fast and Furious movies. It was in Zero Dark 30. Obviously, this is a rifle that killed Bin Laden, so it was in the Bin Laden raid in that movie. Some of the Transformers movies, there's a couple of other more modern movies that are still having this rifle pop up, but it's It's a cool looking rifle, but again, it is kind of an AR-15 variant, so it fits into that mold. Now, as far as video games, it does get a fair amount of use, and that's going to be in like the Battlefield series. You'll see this pop up in Rainbow Six Siege. There's a 416 variant in there, as well as like Call of Duty Ghosts, you have the M27 in there. So it does pop up in video games. It just doesn't quite rise to the S tier in my mind because it is in a lot of ways an AR-15, but it is an absolutely beautiful one that is very, very well made. All right, guys, and that's going to do it for today. And thank you for coming along, checking out my MR556A1 video. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm going to have more stuff coming down the pipeline in the future, so please stay tuned for that, and I'll talk to you later.